Hello, my friend, and welcome. This is the Back to Me podcast, and I am Heather, and I am super excited that you are here. And I just want to let you know that you're going to hear some tips and some tricks, some ideas, all to help you live your happiest and healthiest life. It is called Back to Me because when you are taking care of yourself, then you can take better care of others. And my goal is to make the world a better place. This is Wellness Your Way. I am really happy that you're here. Your true self is waiting. So it is time to step up and thrive. Hello, my friend. Welcome. This is the Back to Me podcast. And we are here having another conversation because I've discovered it is actually one of my favorite things to do. Not only do I have this podcast, but I go and talk on everybody else's podcast. And a lady actually asked me today, funny enough, I was on one this morning, and she said, "Aren't you tired of telling the same story over and over?" I said, "No, because every time I tell it, I have a new realization because something has changed." And I'm hoping that happens with Anne Hince, correct? Did I say that right?
Yes.
Welcome. And you are, among other things, an author, and the book is A Pathway to Insight, right? And we'll get into that. But first, when I was reading some of the information that you sent over and about your dad teasing you about your voice, I was like, why? It sounds fine to me. But my dad would tease me too. It's okay. So you can talk about that if you want, or like what drew you to be an author? Was that because you didn't want to talk?
No, it's because I'd gone through this whole journey of transformation and developed this crazy, powerful ability that I didn't know was available to us. And I wanted to write down the steps that I went through so that other people could do this too, because I'd never heard anyone talk about being able to see or sense inside their body before and release tension in the bones and the connective tissue. So I figured that I needed to do it. So that's why I'm here telling people about it too.
And so the pathway to insight. So I have many questions that are just popping into my head like little popcorns. So how did you discover you had this? Like, what drew you down that road?
Well, it was a whole path over many years. I started out had PTSD basically from childhood, from both parents being alcoholics, and my dad had a very short temper. So I was always afraid on the inside. And I didn't realize until I was in my late 30s that my childhood was still affecting me. So it took one event in my late 30s that made me realize that. And then I realized I had to do something about it because I had two young boys at home and I didn't want to be the same parent that my parents were. I wanted to be different. And so I knew I had to work through all my childhood traumas. And so I did that. And that was just the first step on the journey. And it just went deeper and deeper and deeper.
Right. And it's so interesting. I mean, I feel like childhood is where we're supposed it's the wrong phrasing. Childhood is where you have the opportunity to learn and process many things. And if you can learn it, but if you don't process it, man, it's going to come back and rear its ugly head sometimes in ways that don't work well. So, I mean, if it's not something you want to get into, that's fine. But what realization did you have that this was still stuck inside of you?
Well, I had a business altercation with two other mothers at my boys' school. Oh. And these women were not like me. They were self-confident, self-assured, authority type women in my mind. And they told me I'd done something wrong. And I just could not stop my mind spinning. It just went over and over, what I'd said, what they'd said, what I did, what I could have done differently, all the different permutations over and over and over for 3 days. I just could not stop my mind spinning.
And they were probably not even thinking about it after that, were they?
No.
Right.
But it was at the end of that I realized, okay, first of all, this is not normal. No one else I knew would react that intently to something that really wasn't a big deal. And I realized it felt a little bit like how I would react when my dad would tell me I'd done something wrong. So that was the little opening that maybe there's still something. Of course, it's funny to look back on now, right? Because there was so much that was affecting me, but I was just shown that little nugget there. And that's what started me on the journey.
Well, it's interesting because the habits that you form serve a purpose. Like all of these ways of reacting serve a purpose as you are kind of developing, but then you hit a point where they're not really serving you anymore, but you don't recognize it all the time. And I love the fact that you recognize the similarities between the two reactions, because rumination, is not healthy. And I have been in that place where this was before, because I didn't realize until you said it that I used to do that a lot. Like the ruminating, oh my God, I did something wrong, and staying with it for so long. And somehow I cleared it without tying it back to anything, probably through other processes that I used. But it's so interesting that was like, oh, that little ting wake up call. And you actually took an action, which is kudos to you.
Right. Except I didn't know what to do at the time. I had no idea what to do with this information I had just got. But it was in that time frame I went to a doctor's appointment. I can't remember why I went to a doctor's appointment, but this doctor was a holistic physician. So he had more tools in his toolbox than most doctors do. And he recognized that I was stressed because I was a stay-at-home mother with 2 healthy young boys. So it should have been okay. But he realized I was more stressed than I should be. And he asked me on a scale of 0 through 10 what my stress level was. And I said 8. And then he asked me why. And it was that question that made me realize, oh, it was finding my mother dead on the bathroom floor when I was 19.
Oh my gosh.
Because the tears from that event were still just under the surface 20 years later.
I was going to say, how long had that been? 20 years, and you're still, wow.
Hadn't dealt with it. Yeah, it was still sitting inside. And now I realize, we extend so much energy holding those tears inside, right? So life is tiring, right? Life is burdensome when we hold all that inside of us. And once
it's like you're holding a weight.
It is.
It's almost like you're holding a heavy weight. It doesn't even have to be heavy. If you hold a small weight out, arm stretched, it's going to become tiring.
Yeah. And especially right now that I have done all this work, I've actually grown. What I now say is I have decompressed 3/4 of an inch. So I'm taller than I've ever been in my life because I've released that burden.
Wow. Good for you for getting taller. There you go.
Thank you.
And finding anybody deceased is shocking. I feel like it. I don't know this as a personal experience. I just have a sense that it would be so disconcerting. And having someone close to you and complicated relationship close to you, like your poor little 19-year-old self.
Yeah. And I was alone in the house. My brother was at his girlfriend's. My dad was working overseas. So yeah,
wow.
It was definitely
like you did
traumatic.
And I guess did you have support systems in place of any kind?
No. We'd always lived overseas in different countries. And so we were back in England at the time, but we really didn't know many people. We had family that lived 120 miles away, and that was the closest.
And I guess, so what do you do in that kind of situation?
I just went on with life. I didn't know to do anything else because that's how I'd been programmed up to that point, right? When something happens,
keep calm and carry on.
Yeah, that's right.
My grandparents are British. I know it. Keep calm and carry on. Drink more tea.
Yes.
Okay, I've got my tea right here, everybody. Don't worry. So, so did your father come home for that? I guess he
did. He came home a couple of days later, yes.
But still, it's like that is imprinted. And 19, you're technically in some ways an adult, but you still have so much to learn as you transition into the person you're going to become. Did that feel like, so as something you're carrying, what made you feel like you had to carry that, like on the inside?
I didn't know I was.
Oh, okay.
I was just carrying on with life. I didn't know any different. I didn't know therapy existed. I'd never heard of it before. I'd also had multiple other traumas in my childhood. So I was adopted. I was born with my right foot up against my right shin. Had a house fire. I was the one who saw the flames coming through my bedroom wall.
Oh my gosh.
I was in the car when my dad drove over a girl's ankle. I was sent to a boys' boarding school for a year and was teased mercilessly.
Why were you in a boys' school?
It was my brother's school, and they had day girls who would go home at night, but I was the first girl there who would actually live there.
Why do they do that to people?
Plus, we lived in Hong Kong, and I was sent to boarding school in England, which is halfway across the world. So, yeah, I was used to holding things inside.
Yeah.
And I just continued.
So you had this realization. You figured you had to, like, I guess when the doctor asked you, did it kind of like release the floodgates, or?
Well, I realized that, I answered him this question that's saying it was finding my mother, and he knew the technique that's called EFT, which is short for emotional freedom technique, or tapping. You're familiar with it?
I love tapping. Yes.
Good.
It's the best.
Yeah. He tapped with me about my mother's death for about 15 minutes. And I walked away from that appointment being able to tell the story of her death in my mind without the tears there for the first time ever. So that was the first time I realized that we hold those memories and those emotions physically in our body, and that we can let them go. And before that day, I had no idea that was possible. So that was the beginning of my journey.
Amazing. And for people who don't know what EFT is, there's an episode somewhere back in the archives where I talked to an EFT coach. So I'll just put a link in the show notes so people can find it. But it is like, EFT is so good. I've used it, and it does. So I've taught yoga for a long time, like 20 odd years. And in teaching yoga, people will have emotional breakdowns, and you're thinking, well, I'm not talking about anything. This was before I knew what was going on. And it's just like that, those emotions trapped in the body. Yoga has a way of, they'll come out at unexpected times. But at least with EFT, like you can, it's kind of, I don't know, how would you describe it? As it's like turning it down or releasing it, or?
Yeah, it's releasing the energy that's stored in the nervous system. And the way I use it now, or the way I talk about it, it's stored in the connective tissue. Like, because now I can sense inside, I know I'm releasing adhesions in the connective tissue. So that's where it's stored. So think about when you're doing a yoga pose, right? You're holding yourself in tension in a particular place. And if there's something stored in that tension, if there's a memory or emotion stored in that tension, as it releases, that memory and the emotion also releases.
Oh, heck yes, it does.
Yes.
And pigeon is notorious for that. So if anybody's ever felt like they were going to lose it in pigeon, don't worry, it's fine. Just breathe through it and let it release.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
Yeah. So you discovered EFT, and I guess that was like, he opened a new door for you.
He did. And I started using it every day. I started noticing when I was emotional, I would tap and bring myself back to peace, and then I'd carry on with my day. Notice the next time I was emotional, then I would tap again, bring myself back to peace. And things started to change. So I started to become more peaceful. I was less reactionary. I wasn't triggered as much. And I wanted it to go faster. I wanted more, and I wanted it faster. So I wrote down every trauma that I could think of from my childhood, every emotional wound that was in there, multiple sheets of paper. And I worked through one each night for about an hour to an hour and a half of EFT tapping every night. And things just started to change really quickly. I was just becoming more peaceful. My mind, which had always been very busy.
And you're only using EFT, right?
Yep.
Wow.
My mind started to become quiet, and I realized the thoughts that had been replaying in my mind had been my dad's thoughts or words that I had taken on as my own and replayed. But I couldn't see that until they were gone.
Right.
And it was kind of a magical time. But yes, I was doing EFT tapping. Now, not necessarily the same as we hear a lot online. I was sticking with the negative. I was doing the same thing, the same phrase, the same story over and over again until it felt like there was nothing there, until it was boring, basically. And that's when I knew it had been cleared out. But as that happens, as you're doing that, the tapping is kind of opening up the subconscious mind, which is the same as deepening our self-awareness. So, for example, like the story of my mother's death, I tapped through it with the doctor, but then I tapped through it many times after that. And each time I would start at the beginning when I woke up that morning and tap through and tell the story, and more details of the story would come to life, that come back to my consciousness from my subconscious.
Right.
And so I just keep doing that until all of it was open. It's kind of like opening a wound, right? Cleaning out the wound inside and then allowing it to heal. So that was the process. And in that process, the deepening of the self-awareness was, I realized that I was becoming aware of my emotions, which had been very much suppressed before. And then I became aware of the physical sensations underneath the emotions.
Wow.
So I'm thinking you probably know this, right? If we're feeling an emotion such as frustration, we're actually describing, the word frustration describes the physical sensations, the tension that we're holding inside. So I became able to explain where that tension was, feel where that tension was inside my body, which are the physical sensations underneath the emotions. Right. And then I could either tap on that, right? I could tap saying, okay, I can feel the frustration in my solar plexus. I can feel it right there. Or I could just focus on the sensations themselves, and then they would release.
Oh, without the tapping even?
Right. Once I could focus my mind or focus my attention enough, I could just feel the feelings.
Right.
And they would release.
And it's so interesting. Like, and I know it, but I don't think I ever have heard it articulated that when we're describing emotions, we're actually describing a physical thing. It's so fascinating because my brain just went, dun, da, da. See, I told you, every time I do a podcast, my mind is blown because I can remember March 2020. Let's go back to the time before. And that's what I call the pre-COVID time. And my main income at that time was I was a massage therapist and a yoga teacher, and you have to be with people to earn to do that. And when I got an email from my regulating body, because we're regulated in Canada, that I wasn't allowed to work anymore because of COVID, and there was no knowledge of when it was going to opening up again. The anxiety that I suffered manifested as I thought I needed to go have an ultrasound of my abdomen. I thought I had cancer. It's like, but that's like a manifestation of that energy. That anxiety is a body thing. Well, so awesome. Now I did recognize that it was anxiety, but I was like, how do I get rid of it? I should have tapped.
Yeah.
Instead, I sat with it and meditated. But I think tapping would have been faster. And it is so funny that when you discover something, so we spoke briefly, my grandparents were from the UK, from England. And when my grandfather died, I didn't find him, but 2 years after he had died, I described it to my husband as emotional incontinence. Even 2 years after his death, I would just randomly start crying. I was like, why? And I didn't want to go to therapy. I knew what therapy was. I'm like, God, that's just going to take forever. They're going to make me talk about it. So I went for hypnotherapy because I'm like, let's just take the fast track. Let's just get right down to it. You did EFT. I did hypnotherapy. I think they're fabulous, both of them. So as you discover this new superpower, it's like you've got the EFT. Now you can see it in your own body and things are changing. So what did you see was changing? Just like,
so let me just explain the next step, which was where the superpower came in.
Yeah.
So feeling the feelings, feeling the sensations in the body. I just did that over and over, right? I'd done EFT, I don't remember how many years it was, but it was years. And then I did feeling the feelings for years. And I would go back and feel collective traumas, right? Because I'd done my childhood. So I'd go back through 9/11, like all the memories and the emotions I'd stored inside, and I would release them. So it's kind of loosening up my body during that period. I experienced Kundalini energy for months there at that point. And then I realized at one point when I was working on something, and I felt these sensations in my abdomen. I was holding my focus there, feeling those sensations. And I realized my awareness was inside the body, not outside, and it would stay there. And it was a different feeling. I'd never felt it before, didn't know what it was, but I played with it. So I realized I could do it again. So I felt the feeling again. I moved it around. I moved my awareness around inside. I could feel tension versus no tension. So then I would focus on the tension, just feel it, not try and change it, just feel it. And I could feel it release a little bit. So I do the same thing over and over again. So now I'm working on tension inside my body. Eventually, after many months, I was able to put my awareness inside my head. And that was huge because, for one thing, I'm close to my ears, which is a strange thing to say, but there's a reason for that. But also the pain in my left cheek that I became aware of was almost unbearable. It was so intense, and it had been there my whole life since I think I was born with my right foot up against my right shin and my whole body was twisted. That pain originated in my left cheek. And I had just not been aware of it before. But now I had these tools. So I would focus on it only for seconds to begin with because it was so intensely painful. But it would release a little bit, then I'd do it again and again and again. So it's the same thing that we're doing with EFT, right? With EFT, we're focusing on one thing until it releases. And with the sensations, you're focusing on it till it releases. Now I'm focusing inside. And at one point, I actually heard and felt something release, and it sounded and felt like old fabric ripping. So it was a little scary.
You're like, what did I just tear?
Right. So I went home because I was out at the time. I went home, did some research. I realized it was an adhesion in the connective tissue that was releasing. So it was a good thing.
Yeah.
So I kept doing that. And, over the years, I've actually felt my skull bones relax into place. Now, I didn't know they weren't relaxed before until they relaxed. And then
Have you ever had cranial sacral therapy done?
I have in the past.
Right. Yes. It sounds almost like you're just doing it with intention.
Right. Yeah. So now I've had x-rays done. I'm having another one next week, which will be available before this goes out, to show the changes in the last 3 years. But my skull bones have shifted. They've come more into alignment, right? We hear that word in the spiritual community. So it's physical alignment as well as spiritual and emotional, mental alignment. And so that's the physical change, right? But along with the physical changes come the other changes too. And there's all sorts of changes. I'm way more peaceful than I used to be in the past. I feel lighter. I haven't lost weight, but I feel lighter, right? The energetic body is lighter.
It's just gravity.
My voice is different because the tension in my skull has released, and that's the echo chamber for our voice, right?
Right.
So that's shifted. I can hear with not just my ears, but I can feel sound vibrations in my body. So there's all sorts of changes, and it's fun.
Wow, that is very cool. And I guess this experience that you went through, like, it sounds like you are a very single-minded, dedicated human being.
Well, one thing that really helped me along the way, and it was fairly early on in the journey, right, was realizing that the emotions that we hold inside are just energy. They're just energy that's stuck inside and it wants to leave. So all we have to do is find a way for it to release, and then we can be on the other side. We can have the freedom on the other side. So once I really grokked that, right, once I really got it and understood that was the case, it became easy to go for it, right? Because I want to find that peace. So yes, it does take determination and willpower and time, but it's a fun journey.
Right. And so your book, The Pathway to Insight, is that's like you're talking about those steps that you took. And have you found that like you have shown other people to do it, or taking people through that? Yeah.
I don't have many people who've actually got inside their body, right? Because that is the opening of the third eye. It's insight, it's inward sight. I have one friend who now is able to do that, which is really, really fun. But yes, it's those steps. I talk through the different steps and the weird things that happen in the body as we release that tension.
Don't worry, you're not dying. You didn't just tear open any blood vessels. I used to go see this cranial sacral guy who, when he was working on my skull, I could hear it going.
Oh yeah, like, I hear that many, many times each day. I'm working back in my atlas and axis bone right now, and my jawbone. And yes, I hear cracks and creaks and really old stuff releasing. Right? Yeah, probably 50 to 100 times a day.
And it is interesting, like going back to what you were talking about, it was your father's voice. We were talking about what was stuck in the
thoughts,
the thoughts,
critical thoughts, judgmental thoughts.
Because when you think about it, those came from somewhere. Like anytime that you're having critical thoughts or you're thinking that you are less than a divine being, those aren't the thoughts that you arrived with. They actually aren't yours. They were installed by something outside of you, and you can take time and get some new software installed. Like remove the viruses, get them out. Oh my God, we need some malware for our brains.
Yeah. Well, when I realized, through being able to sense inside that it's only the tension that's stored in there, that's the darkness. All we have to find is the darkness. We don't have to reinstall the new software.
It's already
all we have to do is find the darkness, find the tension, and let it go. And then it's our natural self. It's our true self underneath that. The positivity comes automatically by itself.
Because it was already there, right?
Yes, it was underneath the darkness.
Yeah,
yes.
That is very cool. And I know you said years and years and years, but I guess you started noticing changes right away. It wasn't like you had to wait years and years to start to feel better. And I guess it was the feeling better that made you keep going.
It was. Plus, I had these young kids at home, and I realized that as I was changing, my interactions with the rest of the family were changing, right? The whole household was becoming more peaceful. So that was a big incentive.
Right. That is the impetus for everything that I do, because I know like each person, whatever it is that's going on with them, each person that you can help to shift a little bit towards something that is more aligned for them will shift them, but it shifts everything else too. Their people, their inner being, their outer being, their relationships, the whole, I'm trying to ripple it to the planet. I'm trying to make a tidal wave of goodness. I am making a tidal wave of goodness, damn it.
Yeah, and I used to tell people, and I still tell people, that every time you tap or you do some of this work, you're changing the future direction of your life, because you're now emitting a slightly different signal to the universe. So you're attracting something different back. So it's even worth doing. And every time you do it, something is shifting.
Right. I like it. And I just started listening. I listened to audiobooks. I just started listening to Georgina Cannon, her last name. She was a hypnotherapist. She did progressions, and she talked these conversations with Nostradamus. So, Nostradamus did all those predictions of the future, although he couched them in rhymes that were hard to understand. But it was like this, well, what if something bad is going to happen? Does that mean you just give up? But I like if you tap, you're already shifting the future. So I'm going to tap away. And
good.
Were you using the traditional tapping like sequence, or was it a different one?
Traditional tapping sequence. I changed the opening statement a little bit. And as I said, I stick with the negative, because a lot of people these days using scripts online, they go towards the more positive. And I've realized that's not stored in the body, right? It's the negative that's stored in the body. So that's what we need to work on. We need to do it over and over again, right? When it's coming through in a script online, people don't tend to do it over and over again, but you need to do it until it's released.
Until you're bored. I like that as
using your own words, right? If we're using someone else's words, it's not going down our neural pathway, our memory that we have inside of us.
Yeah.
So it needs to be our own words and our own names, right? The names of people. And if we learned a different language when we were a child, if that was our primary language, we want to tap in that language as well, because that's what's stored inside of us. So yeah, there are definitely some tricks on how to use EFT, but it's incredibly powerful.
Amazing. And free. And so do you describe some of that in your book as well?
Yes. I also have a PDF on my website, a free PDF that's my summary of the technique and the tips on it. So yes, you can always go there.
Excellent. And I'm going to put it in the show notes, but what is your website?
It's my name, Ann, A-N-N, Hince, Hince.com.
Easy peasy.
Yep.
And I know you have a retreat coming in July.
I do.
Where is that going to be?
It's going to be in Santa Cruz in Northern California. It's for women only. It's for women who've lost a parent, one parent or another. And we're going to do this work on that loss. So on the parent's death, on our previous relationship with our parents, and on the fear of the future without the parent. So it's going to be an intense week, but it's going to be transformational.
It's a whole week long?
Well, no, it's not quite late. It's like 5 days, 4 nights, 5 days.
That's still a lot of work.
Yes.
Don't be as scared, everybody. It's going to be good at the end. Bring a journal.
Yes, I think we'll provide one.
Yes, I always say, make sure you have something to write on, because you want that. I always tell people your head is a factory, not a warehouse. Get it out of your head and onto paper. The kinesthetic of releasing is good.
Yes.
That's awesome. So, and they'll be able to find that on your website as well.
Yes.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay. So don't worry, everybody. I'm going to put it all in the show notes, so you will not be missing anything. And I can see that that's like I can even think of some guys that could use that, but I understand women only. Sorry, dudes. You just have to read the book for the moment.
Right.
For the moment. Right. Amazing. Oh my gosh. So many good tools. I'm going to go get the PDF, because I love having more tools in my toolbox to help me, which is where the podcast came from. And because in helping me, I can help you, right? So that's so amazing. It's so interesting to talk to you, Anne. I feel like I still have a million questions, but we'll get to those on another day. Before we leave, do you have some final words of wisdom for us?
Well, I would encourage everyone to start noticing during the day how they feel, because that's the first step. If you can't do that, you can't do anything about it, right? So just ask yourself, how am I feeling right now? And that's how I started, just noticing that. But I also want people to know how much more depth to life there is that we have no idea about until we start this journey. There is just so much more to life. And when I think back on 20 years ago, it's like I had no idea that all of this was available to us. So I encourage everyone to start this journey and see what happens.
Amazing. And when you do start that journey, friends, send us a note and let us know. Put a little message in the podcast, wherever you're listening, and give us some comments to let us know how that was. And if you know someone who could use this help, send them the podcast. Just send them a note. Here, I listened to this. I thought you'd find it interesting. You don't have to tell them why. Just send it over to them, right? Thank you so much, Anne. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. I'm so happy that you found your way out of that, and that you found so many tools along the way to share with everyone.
Thank you, Heather. Thanks for having this platform to share it for others.
Yes, absolutely. Friends in podcast land, take care of yourselves. If you're having a bad day, go download the tapping. It will help. See you again next time. Hello, my friend. I hope you enjoyed that episode. And if you found it useful and you're like me and you want to help others, please share this, comment, like, subscribe, all of those things that will help this podcast to be found by more people. And if you found it useful, there's a chance that someone else will find it useful as well. If you ever have any questions, I am here to answer your questions. I would love to help you. My direct email address is info@heatherstewart.coach. You can also find me at heatherstewart.coach. And if you go over to my website, you will find copies of the podcast. You'll find the link to my Instagram and my Facebook. And I do have a personal request, because I do want to help as many people as I can with these podcasts. So if you could give me a review And my friend, I would love if you gave me a good one. If you could share this, if you could send it out into the world, I would truly appreciate it. I hope that you have an amazing day. I hope that you are finding your way back to wellness by getting back to me. Take care, my friend. Be well, and we will see you again next time.